Guys, thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here, and there's certainly never a free lunch, so get ready to pay. Okay, so I'm Tom Rusling, General Manager at iAcquire. We are a content marketing agency founded here in Phoenix, and we help companies become great digital brands through content marketing. We do that through organic search and social. We have about 100 employees, offices in New York and San Diego as well. So today I'm just going to talk about trying to provide you guys some context around Google Plus and maybe a way to view it in a different light, and how that ties into Google Authorship, which hopefully a lot of you guys have heard about pieces about that. So we're going to talk about how authorship affects Google's way of trusting and ranking both documents and trusting websites as a whole. And then how that's leading to a very dramatic change in the balance of power between publishers and content creators. So I'm going to start with a question. When Google Plus launched in 2011, who here felt like it was a kind of a lame, not impressive attempt for Google to compete with Facebook? And I'll be the first to raise my hand. Okay, so a little less than maybe half the people in the room. So today, who still feels that way? Okay, so there's still plenty of people that are kind of nonplussed with Google Plus. And so it'll be interesting to think about that maybe after this presentation. Just so you know, I'll go back and I'll say I definitely felt that way, and I have a very different opinion of what Google Plus is and why it actually is extremely important. So to get into organic search for a moment, and to really talk about the way that Google decides to rank documents, it's based on what they think is trustworthy or authoritative. And in the history of Google, the only way that Google really has known how to trust a document is based on where that document is located, essentially what domain is hosting that document. And there's a lot of factors that Google has developed to understand how to trust those domains, but it's always been a question of where the document is and not who created it. So document authority traditionally, just to really hammer this in, has been based essentially just on publisher authority. So again, where, not who. And in 2005, Google came out with a patent filing for what they called agent rank. Have people heard of this before? Is this pretty new to people? Okay, it's great. It helps me just gauge the audience. So we could read this, and it would be really boring. But essentially, if you want some great Friday night reading, go and read a technical search engine, engineer jargon, translated by a patent lawyer for a patent filing. But if you're in the search business, you'll take the time to read it. And I can give you the high level. It's essentially saying that Google's was saying all the way back in 2005 that they're looking at mechanisms in order to understand how to trust who created something, not just where it was placed. So Eric Schmidt, everyone knows that name, I would assume, chairman and former CEO of Google, wrote a book that was published last April, called The New Digital Age. And this is a quote worth reading. Within search results, information tied to verified online profiles will be ranked higher than content without such verification, which will result in most users naturally clicking on the top verified results. The true cost of remaining anonymous, then, might be irrelevance. Okay? So now I'm going to ask you guys, what is Google Plus? You don't have to answer, but kind of think about it for a second. Okay? This is what Wikipedia says. Google Plus is a social network. I think that was all clear to us when it launched in 2011. But it's the second part that's important. An identity service that is owned and operated by Google. And it's the identity service that, to me, is so much more important. So agent rank was a patent filed in 2005. In 2011, Google kind of re-upped the patent because they were still working on it and they hadn't really deployed it to market. And essentially, it was a mechanism to tie into Google Plus so that Google could start to understand and trust users. And then they came out with a rel equals author tag that publishers could put into a document to attribute who was the source that actually created the content. Okay? So has anyone in this room actually had something published and then had that rel author code, which, if you can see, has a unique Google Plus identifier that's unique to each Google Plus account? Has anyone actually published something on a website and then had that authentication put into the HTML? Okay, so a few people have. Okay, so if the publisher puts that in, and that's the unique identifier going back to the person, in this case, Joe Griffin, sitting here, is our CEO and co-founder of iAcquire. You'll see that then if Joe goes into his Google Plus account and he says, I published this article, he's attributing it, the publisher's attributing it, and now you have two-way authentication, right? Now Google can actually, in a very realistic way, tell that this is a person who created this article, okay? So I'll go back and just say the new document authority now, if Google is able to do this, is to say, now we can trust not just where was something published, but who created it. And let's say we have someone like a Guy Kawasaki, who probably most people in this room know that name, who's published all over the web. And not only is he published, but there's a lot of social interaction when he posts things. People link to it. People give it tweets and likes and all that. He becomes a very trusted person. If Guy Kawasaki put an article that he authenticated on a site that's never had a piece of content on it, could Google now trust that piece of content? And the answer is yes. And the answer prior to very recently was no. Okay, so we've started to see snippets in the search results, right? Where you're searching for something, what is the best way to select a cruise for my family? And up comes the 10 results, and you'll see often there's a couple results that are going to have a person's picture there, right? That's from Google Authorship, right? Google started to do more and more, place more and more of these into their search results. And then in late last year, Matt Cutts, who's the head of Google search quality, he said that you should expect to see the agent rank is going to be kicking in, but also that the number of stickies or pictures in the search results is going to be slightly reduced because they're going to start looking for a little bit higher quality metric in that. Okay? And so what you'll see is, and again, this is an example of that, there's going to be slightly less of those moving forward. And he announced that, and then for the last about 5 weeks or 4 weeks of 2013, there was a decrease of about from 23 down to about 20%. Obviously, what's the advantage to this? It's showing that Google trusts these authenticated pieces. It also tends to have a much higher click-through rate, right? If you see that and you identify it with a person, it helps you connect, and there's a lot of studies that have shown the click-through rate can be 3 to 4 times higher in some cases. Okay, so true to his word, what Matt Cutts said, we're going to reduce the number of these posts showing up in our search results. That did occur, but does that mean that authorship is less important than it was? Okay. So now I'm going to kind of jump over and I'm going to talk about domain authority. Everything I've been talking about is really how does Google trust a document at the page level? And we've kind of looked at it can now trust where something was published and who wrote it. But there hasn't been a lot of discussion in the organic search arena around how could that actually affect how Google looks holistically at a website, right? So domain authority, if people are not familiar with that term, it's a term that's used all the time inside the world of organic search, is the overall level of trust a domain has in the eyes of a search engine, and it traditionally is driven by factors including domain age, popularity, which are essentially links, size and freshness of content. That's a simplification. There's a lot of other factors, but those are the basic ones. It's important to understand that search engines prefer to highly rank content on sites that they've found ways to consider trustworthy, right? So traditionally, the main quality signal for that has been links, tied to the volume and type of quality links from documents on other trusted domains. Has anyone ever taken a look at people are probably at least familiar with SEO Moz? It's the big kind of community hub for the search engine marketing world. So every year they take a group of experts in the field, and I always define SEO as a collective hunch, right? It's just a bunch of people figuring out what works and sharing information, right? So every year they take some of the leading experts in the market and they survey them on what is your collective hunch, experts, on what are the factors that help drive domain authority. And I'll tell you something. They've been doing this survey, I think, since about, what, 2006, something? I'm not sure. But for a lot of years. And the factors don't change that much year over year. And the 2013 survey looked a lot like the 2012 survey. And I put this up not because of what's up there, but to me, it's what isn't up there. Okay? There's no mention here of, it's always been links to the page, links to the domain are the two huge, almost 50% factors, right? There's no mention here at all of authorship or who's actually creating content or how lots of trusted content creators on a website might show authority and trust in a new way. Now I'm going to get into a lot of just speculation. I think we're going to start to see that people view this authorship not just as a mechanism of trust for a page, but a domain that has lots of trusted authors. Google would probably be able to make the assumption that I can start to trust that domain because a lot of very good, trustworthy people are publishing their content on it. So there could be a lift for the overall site and not just the pages that have authorship. So this, again, the 2013 survey by Moz, there was a mid kind of level mention of authorship affecting page level trust, and there was absolutely nothing mentioned in the overall algorithm or things that affect domain level authority. So this is the question I'm putting in front of people now, and it's being discussed a lot, is could a collection of diverse, highly trusted authorship contributors act as a key trust indicator of a domain rather than just that page level? Okay, and so companies that are in the SEO space, what they're really trying to do, and traditionally they've done it a lot with link building, is they're trying to drive domain authority and trust signals. And so I think this is kind of a question, is could the future of building domain authority really be tied into, instead of just thinking about links and a few other factors, but could it feature a collection of authenticated posts from a collection of highly trusted author agents who create engaging content which garners social interaction, comments, and links, right? If Google starts to find that you've posted something and you've posted on a lot of sites that are considered trustworthy, and those posts that you've authenticated start to have a lot of social interaction, comments, tweets, pluses, all that stuff, it's going to start to be able to trust whatever future items that you're publishing. It will probably want to put that in front of their users over something that isn't authenticated or known. Okay? So if you think about Google, this is the first time since Google has been a company where they're truly introducing a totally new type of signal that I think eventually could become as or more important than any type of link signal. And it's really just a thought that authenticated digital signatures are superior to links, and Google is moving away from strings to things. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of segue into a little bit of a story time. I was speaking with a gentleman named Robert Frump. He's been a journalist for the last 50 years, and now he's a a content marketer, among other things, and a published author. He told me a story about back in the 1400s when the Gutenberg printing press was developed. And in those first 50 years or so, there were very few people who actually had the technical know-how to operate a printing press. And it was suddenly becoming something that everybody wanted. So in those first 50 years, the handful of people that had that technical prowess started to become almost princely in nature in the way that they were treated in society. They were courted by kings. But then what happened over time, more people started to learn the technology. Ideas spread. And eventually, the power of the person who had the technical know-how started to go away compared to the power, started to shift back into the people who were actually creating the content and the ideas that needed to be printed. And if you think about that, and then you think about what we've experienced in the first 20 or so years of the internet, I think that's a very interesting juxtaposition. No big news, but just to substantiate the point, print journalism is an economy in shambles. We all know the stories of a lot of journalists that have been taken out during the last especially 10 years or so. There's a website I found that's dedicated to newspaperdeathwatch.com. I mean, it's gallows humor, similar to this gentleman back here, but I think it just drives the point of what's happening. And so what we've seen is that if you think about the traditional key features that a newspaper has had before the digital age, it was really, I think, boils down to two things. It was trust, and then it was distribution. And nobody really had trust or distribution without the newspapers or magazines and that kind of thing. But the question is, do you need a newspaper now to have trust and distribution? No. And authorship is just going to further that. So what we're starting to see is just like that Gutenberg press story. You're starting to see, I think, the power is coming back into the hands of the content creators, right? And there's a very big shift that I would expect to be seeing, especially over the next 2 years, between publisher authority and author authority. So what does that mean for us? If you think about Google PageRank, which people probably know what that is, and it's a very basic metric Google's had for years that shows kind of the authority or trust level of a domain or of a page. And essentially, in a very simplistic way, you could look at Google PageRank was the publisher graph. It understood the relationship of how publishers existed and referenced by linking to each other. And then in the mid-2000s, we started to have this blooming of social media companies, and Facebook was kind of invented the concept of the social graph, and we have the social graph coming from Twitter and LinkedIn and a lot of other sources. All of a sudden, we have this agent rank that's coming into play, and there's really no author graph, at least that's publicly known outside what everyone assumes Google has created. So what we've done at iAcquire, and I'm certain that we're not the only ones that have been working on this, but for the last about 10 months, we have put a lot of our thought and resources into creating VOICERANK, which is essentially our version of an author graph. And that's so that we can discover authors and evaluate the authority and trust of people that have digitally authenticated their content across the web. So we'll look at engagement factors that I talked about earlier, which are the frequency of the posts by the authors, the types of publisher authority where they're showing up. If I get posted on the Huffington Post versus a lesser known blog, that's going to show some type of higher level of trust and authority. Links and citations and social interactions all should really drive VOICERANK. So here's some of our early findings, and we have not released VOICERANK to the public, but we're literally weeks away from doing that. But so far what we've done is we don't want to necessarily discover every single Google Plus author out there. what we want to look at as marketers are who are actually participating in what we've deemed as the most important, relevant 70,000 digital publications, which is still quite a bit. And so we analyzed 70,000 digital publications. We looked at all their posts that were published over a 30-day period recently. And of those, we discovered 25,000 unique Google Plus authenticated profiles. So this is also really interesting because what's the adoption by publishers that are choosing to go and put that Google Plus authorship markup into their posts? And if you look at the top 70,000 digital publishers, you're going to find that about a little over 16% of those actually had at least one instance of authorship markup. But as we go up and we look at the smaller subset of the top 2,500, all of a sudden that number bumps to almost 25%. And then when we look at the top 500 sites, a lot of the big names that would be known to all of us, there's actually a 38% almost utilization rate. So the bigger, more sophisticated platforms are already figuring this out. And I would conjecture that the more sophisticated journalists have already started to catch on to how important this is. And it's one of the things that they're either asking for or starting to demand. So what does that do? Talked about a shift in the power balance, right? I think we're going to very quickly see a new writer economy, right? Marketers are going to start to place a great amount of value on the who and not just the where. Writers are suddenly, for the first time in this world of Google, going to become a very important part of the value chain where they had no participation before. And so I think what we're going to see is a newly defined economy and career path for established writers. Right? For us, it's a kind of, so what do you do with, you create that voice graph, that author graph, and you think about what can we do with that? And for us, it's, okay, let's find a way to understand how do we help publishers connect with these high authority writers? Who are those high authority writers? And recruit them so that publishers can go and work with these writers. And so we created a system called Clear Voice, which we've released over the last just few weeks. And it's just a platform to use that author score that we've created and help publishers looking for great content by trusted people to connect and drive their content development for their websites and their web marketing, content marketing plans. Comes back to a quote by Plato, those who tell stories rule the world. I think we're coming back to that point, which is really cool. So what does that mean? Okay, one, change the way you should approach your content development for your business website. Look for authorship to be a key trust signal for your entire domain, not just necessarily your page levels. And this should start to affect your thinking on how you might choose to develop your personal brand or the personal brands of the people in your enterprise. Okay, so hopefully you guys may be coming out of this with a slightly different understanding of what Google Plus is and what authorship means and why it's, I think, really actually going to drive a big change in the world over the next several years. And that's it. Thank you.